So let's start this hour with some brand new polling just out this morning that shows Kamala Harris taking the lead over Donald Trump, this time nationally. New numbers from USA Today and Suffolk University show Harris ahead by 5 points, 48% to 43%, among likely voters nationwide. That is within the margin of error, but does mark a major shift from a poll conducted immediately after June's presidential debate between Trump and President Joe Biden. In that survey, when Biden was still the presumptive Democratic nominee, he trailed Trump by 3 points among registered voters. Harris's surge is being driven by major gains among some key groups. 18 to 35-year-olds have gone from backing Trump by 11 points in June to now supporting Harris by 13 points. Among Hispanic voters, Harris leads by 16 points after Trump led Biden by 2 back then in June. And Harris has also expanded Biden's 47-point lead with black voters to a whopping 64-point lead now. And Jen, let's get your take on this, because this is, national polls only mean so much. Let's, of course, establish that. But this is reflective of a trend line. And I think it's important to note here, we're not really seeing in all these surveys, it's not like Trump's numbers are really going down per se, at least not much. It's more that Harris is growing support. It seems like Democrats who, for whatever reason, had really cooled on President Biden are now coming home because they're excited about her.
That's exactly right. And remember, just over a month ago, there was a larger number of double haters, as we called them, people who weren't thrilled about either candidate. There was a percentage of undecided voters that kind of wavered poll to poll. And this all is a reflection of Democrats coming home, or Democratic-leaning voters coming home, which is a very good sign for the Biden and Walz campaign, exactly what you want coming out of the convention. And one of the most interesting numbers, certainly 18 to 34-year-olds, but the Hispanic number, Latinos, is super interesting, because this is a group that Trump and the Trump team has really done a ton of outreach to. And it is a group that you have seen some trends in certain states that has been leaning sometimes more Republican than they have been historically Democratic. So this is a very good sign for them. What this means, too, and you see this in state polls, which are much more interesting to me than national polls, is that some of the states that seem to be off of the competition lane for the Democratic ticket, like Arizona, Nevada, Georgia, are back in competition. And that's a very good sign for the Harris-Walz team, because they have more maps to get to 270. And it's not just the blue wall, even though the blue wall will still be pivotal.
Yeah, and Jen, let's talk about some of those Sunbelt states. We had Fox News poll we showed earlier this morning. We can put up again now. You see it here. These are all within the margin of error, but Harris, 1 point up in Arizona, 2 in both Georgia and Nevada, and down just 1 in North Carolina. And to your point, she suddenly just has a lot more options, a lot more ability to get to 270. So weigh in on that, but also, are there concerns among Democrats, though, that Harris maybe not quite as strong as Biden in some of those blue wall states, or do the Democrats feel like, hey, we're still good there, too?
Look, I think for any campaign, and if you're sitting in the Harris-Walz campaign, you have to be excited about where you've made progress and also be clear-eyed about where you still need to make more progress. And there are areas where Biden was quite strong, including older white people, and especially in blue wall states, where Harris and Walz need to do some work and need to do some more campaigning and outreach. They're aware of that, but that is an important focus for them, or clear-eyed thing they need to be thinking about. And what's interesting about these numbers is that, and what the Harris team, I should say, needs to be very cognizant of, is that people can't get too overly excited like the race is won out there. It was an exciting convention for a lot of Democrats. It was amazing to watch just as a human being, but this is still a very close race. And some of those states, they're not all created equal. Georgia, for example, where Harris and Walz are doing the bus tour right now, is arguably a better state for them than, say, North Carolina. And Democrats definitely want to win North Carolina. North Carolina is a state where they're competing. The governor there is like 20 points ahead. The Democratic candidate for governor is 20 points ahead of the Republican. But it is a harder state because in some ways it's more expensive. The demographics are not as strong for the Democrats as they are in Georgia. So they still have to make some decisions between these states because ultimately it's about getting to 270. You don't get like a gold star for winning North Carolina, even though hopefully they'll compete in North Carolina and maybe even win North Carolina. But those are some of the decisions I think if you're sitting the Harris-Walz team, you've got to be making at this point.
Yeah, and I think they just also announced in the last day or so they're employing now considered one of their top surrogates, President Joe Biden, heading to Pennsylvania, heading to Wisconsin to speak to voters where with him he is still quite popular in those blue wall states in the days ahead. Eugene, tonight, of course, will be the airing of Vice President Harris's first major televised interview since she ascended to the top of the ticket. It's being taped this afternoon. Will air tonight. She'll be alongside her running mate Tim Walz for that. You've extensively reported on some of the behind-the-scenes thinking as to when and with whom Harris is going to do this interview. Give us a preview as to what the campaign hopes to achieve from this, and do we have a sense that this will just be the first of many?
We do. I think, one of the first on that last question is that she will do, I'm told, many solo interviews as we move forward. We in the media probably have a different definition of many than folks on the campaigns. That's for sure. But we'll see her over and over do these kind of solo hits with folks as we move forward to November 5th. What they're hoping to do, one, I think, is kind of quiet the chatter about the fact that she hasn't done the interview since she's became even the presumptive nominee just over a month ago, right? Get the conversation moving differently. They sometimes don't feel this when it was the Biden campaign, even now as the Harris campaign. Not everyone feels that traditional media is the way to go. Not great news for us. And you already saw her and Walz do different kind of creator content behind the scenes at the DNC that started to trickle out this week. They're also hoping to continue to show these two as kind of like a buddy comedy that's been on the road and also talk about some serious issues. Dana Bash from CNN is the one that's doing it. She's really good at these kinds of things. The campaign also pushed back to me last night about the fact that it's two people, right? The Republicans have said Harris is using Walz as a minder. That is very unlikely. And this is something that happens all the time, right? Trump and Vance did a two-person interview. Palin and McCain did a two-person interview. Obama and Biden. It's kind of a tradition at this point. But we're hoping, I think, to hear some policy questions. There's still a lot of questions about how not just the economics. She's talking about this opportunity economy that is the center of her campaign. But also there's foreign policy. Right, we have the Middle East and everything going on there, and also about Trump. Right, I think folks want to continue to see her talk about and go after Donald Trump. That's not really what the campaign wants to do, but I assume Dan will ask about a lot of that as well.